Donald Trump can only deport a small percentage of the immigrants who are actually unlawfully present in the United States. And I'm going to explain exactly why that is. So the president who was referred to as the deporter-in-chief was Barack Obama. He actually deported up to 436,000 people in a single year because he received a massive influx of funding from Congress. In fact, in that year, he received $18 billion to deport more people than have ever been deported in history in a single year. During the course of his 8 years, he deported around 3 million people. Now, Donald Trump, on the other hand, during his 4 years, deported an average of 326,000 people per year, which is, in terms of deportations, not bad. That's pretty close to the average that we saw before Obama and after Trump. Interestingly, Biden deported more people per year on average than Trump, something that will make some people's heads explode. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how many people can Trump actually deport in just 4 years. So Tom Homan, Trump's new border czar, let's see how long that lasts, has said that he wants 100,000 detention beds to facilitate a mass deportation program. There are currently 40,000 beds available. And when I say beds, I mean these are like private prisons or public prisons and jails that have contracts with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And by the way, it took around the last 20 years to create all those beds. So if we're going to go from 40,000 to 100,000, it's probably going to take more than 1 day to make that happen. I would argue it would take more than a decade to make that happen. But just for argument's sake, let's say on day 1 of Trump's presidency, Tom Homan has those 100,000 beds to begin a mass deportation program. The average stay in a detention facility for an immigrant is 37.5 days based on various sources. And by the way, after an immigrant is detained, they can be released by an immigration judge if the judge determines that they're not a danger to society and they're not a flight risk. So 100% of the people who are detained will not be deported. But just for argument's sake, let's say 100% of Tom Homan's 100,000 people every 37.5 days are physically removed and deported from the United States. That adds up to 973,000 migrants deported from the US every year. You multiply that by 4 years, we get around 3.9 million people. This is impossible, but let's say, just for this argument, that he actually deports 3.9 million people in 4 years. How many people are actually unlawfully present in the US? Well, it depends on which source you consult. The Pew Center says that there's something like 12 million people. Other places say 11.5, other places say 13 million. Let's call it 12 million. If you ask Trump, he says 25 million people are here. My opinion is that there are probably actually more than 12 million people unlawfully present here. I don't actually know this, but just anecdotally, based on my line of work, I interact with a lot of people who have never whatsoever encountered any immigration enforcement, border protection, or law enforcement ever in their lives. They just entered through the border, been unlawfully present in the United States, have never been accounted for in any way. They're just here keeping their heads down, working, and just trying to live life. So let's give Trump the benefit of the doubt and say that there are 25 million people here. It really depends on which one of his rallies you consult or which interview you look at, but he has used that number several times, 25 million people. If that's true, and if he's actually able to deport 3.9 million people, which is very big if, that would account for about 16% of the 25 million people he claims are in the US. Now, if the number is actually closer to 12 million and he actually deports 3.9 million, that would be around 1/3. So the theoretical max, just based on what Tom Homan wants to do in the numbers he's given, is deport 1/3. And if Trump's right, and there's 25 million people, that means 16% of people could get deported if this theoretical situation actually plays out. Now, there are a lot of ifs in this hypothetical. What do I actually think is going to happen? Pure speculation, but I think the number of deportations per year is going to hover at just under 400,000. I think the funding supports that. I think the infrastructure supports that. So after 4 years, maybe 1.6 million people will be deported. That's a pretty small percentage of the people who are unlawfully present here. This is just pure speculation. I don't actually know what's going to happen. If there's some massive mandate and Congress approves a ton of funding, which as we saw recently in the spending bill, much of Congress is not willing to approve unlimited funds for ridiculous mandates. But if they did, maybe Trump can deport more than 400,000 people a year. I doubt it, but we'll see what happens. All right, guys, that's it for this topic. I'll see you guys tomorrow for another one.